It gives me great pleasure to introduce a classmate of mine and a committee member, Miss Suzanne Villaruz, who will do from 1966 to 1990. Those are our years.
Hi. I'm going to start with actually 1965 because I was part of a big celebration. That's when the Filipinos first walked out of the grape fields to start the strike, and that subsequently led to the United Farm Workers Union. Kind of a big deal in 65. As I go forward, 1966, the library is built, and the first Friends of the Delano Library was formed. And since libraries are kind of under fire now, I'm going to put a plug in for public libraries. Yes, to stay public. Thank you. The completion of the Delano Mortuary occurred in 1967, and we are honored that it was designed by the Delano Design Group, which is Frank Lloyd Wright's group. The people who owned it, Cecil and Betty LaCourse, were his relatives. They asked Frank Lloyd Wright to build it or to design it, and he died, but he left the details, and that's how we have a very historic building. It is the only mortuary designed by Frank Lloyd Wright and Company. In 1968, they honored Mr. Bob Hyatt. The Queen was Pam Schaefer, and Cinco de Mayo honored Robert Aguilar as Grand Marshal, and he has been back in the community in recent years to put his own polish on the city and in the schools of Delano. In 1969, Coach Ray Frederick, he's always Coach Frederick to me, was Grand Marshal for the Harvest Holiday, and he was truly an inspiration for generations of athletes afterwards. The Queen at the time was Marilyn Montgomery, which sounds like such a very, very fancy name, Marilyn Montgomery. She's a lovely lady. In 1970, the mayor was Cliff Loader, who was also, as you heard, one of the founding members of the Kiwanis Club of Delano, of which I am a member. That was a year also that the okay, this is a story, then this is, because these are my era. This is my era I grew up in. That's the time when an arson fire destroyed the science building at the high school, and I think that was Western Auto burned down too on Main Street, to disguise the fact that they were robbing a bank somewhere in town. So and I think that was the year a fireman's house went up in flames and a police officer's house was robbed. It was really kind of not a good year for the services groups. In 71, Grand Marshal was Nora Montgomery. She was the wife of Dr. Montgomery, and Queen was Marcia Mishakian. The Cinco de Mayo Queen was Rosa Castillo, and Delano Travelers Service opened their doors at that time. I think they still exist, but I'm not sure. Oh. In 1972, we have Frank Herrera as mayor, and that's the first time I think Leonard Velasco was the first Filipino elected to a city council in the United States. It was quite a big deal. The board of directors changed Harvest Holidays back to Wine and Harvest, and we're able to do that. The Harvest Holidays started off as Wine and Harvest Festival. In 73, our population was a big 15,000. The Queen was Tonya Horonas, who was a senior when I was a freshman in high school, and the equestrian sweetheart, and back then, if I recall, we called her the rodeo sweetheart, was Susie Peck, also me and Janet's classmate. That's when we had horses over at Memorial Park, and everyone could stable their horses there. Kind of fun. In 74, this was my freshman year, it was a good year, Delano grew, and the Delano Hospital also opened a new hospital. Dr. John Montgomery was the first chief of staff. They had 2 nurses and 2 other employees, Sally Chavon and Vivian De Los Santos were there the day it opened, and just recently Sally retired, and I think Auntie Vivian is still working there. I mean, Vivian De Los Santos. They honored, Queen was Lisa Yoon. 75. Oh, and Delano High School in the fall of 73 went to Valley Finals in football. It was a great year. We did not beat Redwood, but we did beat we beat Hoover. We lost to Redwood in the last 30 seconds of the game. Eddie Cristobal threw an interception. Okay. In 75, and in 75, in 74, we also went to playoffs and lost miserably to Clovis, but I got to cheer at BC Stadium. In 75, the wind is here. Mr. Rieger arrived in Delano, and he has been a very, very true civic-minded person. He served on the redevelopment agency, and while he was there, he helped to bring the Delano Logistics Center to the area, which has provided Delano with many, many things. And Cinco de Mayo Grand Marshal that year was Father Francis Olivart. 76, this is fall of my senior year, Janet and me and a couple people senior year. We had a great time. The Delano Ministerial Association was formed then at that time, and the Delano Record had a thought for the day, which was to provide thoughts, a religious program, half hour of the radio. And let's see, Wendy Yoon was Harvest Holiday Queen. Oh, and in 75, this is not mentioned in this year at all, but that actually was the start of Filipino Weekend in 1975. It was started with a basketball tournament and celebrations like that, but 1975 was the first year. It's not mentioned in the book. If you want, I can write it in later when you buy your copy. In 1977, Janet and I graduated from high school. In other news in Delano, my sister was crowned Philippine Weekend Queen. And Peggy Gonzalez was Cinco de Mayo's queen. Betty Boyven was Harvest Holiday Queen. We were a queenie little town those years. Really into that. In 1978, Delano Community Hospital was purchased by Wesley Bilson, and it became a huge, huge change for the hospital as it started to grow and actually progress from from a little tiny place on Jefferson. And that's when the Driggs family arrived in Delano. In 79, my daughter was born. That was a huge, 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 huge event for me. It was also the year that Arnie came to Delano, and that was also a huge event for me. So 79 was a big year in our family. There's a little bio on Arnie here. It's a really nice one. And the Pandle brothers, 3 brothers, were selected to be Grand Marshals. In 1980, the population of our town had grown from 15,000, I said earlier, to a whole 16,000 later. 80 must have been a slow year, because not a whole lot happened. 81, Steve Kinsey was, I think, the Harvest Holiday president. Grand Marshal was Angel Diaz, and Philippine Weekend Queen was Leonard Velasco's daughter, Leonora Velasco. In 82, they started to build the new hospital we have here on Garces. It was going to include a radiology suite, an obstetrics nursery. A huge parcel of land was purchased. Let me tell you, huge, but they still, never mind. The queen selected for Harvest Holiday was, it says here, selected as queen was Bautista. That was Jennifer Bautista. Her parents, her mom ran an office business on Main Street, and her dad was Anthony Bautista. No, that was his brother. Well, her brother was Anthony Bautista. She's a darling girl, has a restaurant over on the beach. Father John Esquivel was Cinco de Mayo Grand Marshal. In 83, the Delano Community Hospital's name was changed to Delano Regional Medical Center because more than 50% of his patients came from Wasco, Pixley, McFarland, Shafter Pond, Early Mart, Rich Grove, Teviston, and Alpa. The obstetrics wing was dedicated to Dr. and Mrs. John Montgomery. He was a vital force in the formation of the hospital. L.R. Billings was Grand Marshal, and the Queen was Jennifer Andreas. Her father was also a former member of Kiwanis. And Philippine Weekend Queen was Connie Domingo, and Cinco de Mayo Grand Marshal was Wendy Mata, and he was a lovely gentleman who also served on the city council. In 84, Dr. Montgomery was Grand Marshal at that time. The Subacute Center was dedicated as the Nelson Wing in honor of Gloria Nelson, who was a founding member of the Hospital Auxiliary. In 85, how far do I go? 90. In 85, Kukla's Custom Harvesting, Empire Ag was incorporated, and they formed a big business with Christine Kuklas as Secretary Treasurer, Betty Kuklas as Vice President, and Andy Kuklas as President. And Philippine Weekend Queen was Taiki Mascarenas. Harvest Queen was Abby Barwick, who is now Abby Kovakovich. In 1986, Kern County Fire Department took over our fire department services from having our own. That's a big deal. And the Lions Club, still with the support of Nick Daly, was chosen Grand Marshal. In 87, Mr. Gerard, Gary Gerard, was Grand Marshal. And need I say more? Mr. Gerard is still a wonderful man, still moving and kicking it, almost 80. 1988, Steve Kinsey, Winnie Mata, Mickey Chernikoff, Jun Fukawa, and Leonard Velasco were on the City Council. Quite a diverse group, which really reflects our community. And let's see. 1989, due to the substantial increase in the cost of liability insurance if the word wine remained in the name, the Board of Directors again changed the name of Delano Wine and Harvest to Delano Harvest Holidays. And that keeps us in with not such high liability insurance because of the wine part. In 1990, the end of my reign here, Delano Regional Medical Center expanded. The Grand Marshal was Jim Thornton, and Elizabeth Velasco, my dear friend, was Queen. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. And Suzanne failed to mention that she was the very first Philippine Weekend Queen in 1976. Yes, the very first Philippine Weekend. She was only 10. She was only 10.
I was just a little kid. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Suzanne.